A simp is a followerless activity. It's such energy. You know, what happened to men looking up to other men? That's why I say we have to save the simps. Okay, male inequality explained by Richard Reeves.
Warned me against writing a book about boys and men because it's such a fraught subject, particularly in politics right now, and because so many people were afraid that merely drawing attention to the problems of boys and men was implying somehow less effort being paid to girls and women, that it's framed as zero sum. And it's sort of a whose side are you on question, and you have to be on one side or the other rather than just being on the side of human flourishing.
What's the chat? Richard Reeves. I don't know much about him, but I saw Rollo complaining about him earlier. And what's the deal with this guy? Is he on the side of men really, or is he parading around some BS? What's going on with this guy?
One of the real challenges here is that if there are men missing from certain crucial areas of our society and our economy, that makes it harder for other men and boys to flourish in those areas. We have an education system that has a dearth of male teachers. We have a labour market where the jobs that are growing fastest are ones where we have the fewest men. And in families, there's the growth in what you might call the dad deficit or fatherlessness. As men are struggling in each of those areas, what you'll see is it'll be harder for other men to follow in their footsteps. It's harder for boys to flourish if their fathers aren't engaged. It's harder for men to enter occupations where there aren't men. It's harder for boys to do well at school where there are no male teachers to be seen. And so there's a very real danger that unless we act quite soon, that we will set in train something of a vicious cycle. I'm Richard Reeves. I'm a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, and my latest book is Of Boys and Men: Why the Modern Male is Struggling, Why That Matters, and What to Do About it. The overall picture is that on almost every measure...
Jeremy, I think we hit critical mass for change. We just need a leader. This is why they are moving so fast and stopping all the leaders in their tracks.
At almost every age and in almost every advanced economy in the world, the girls are leaving the boys way behind and the women leaving the men. What nobody expected was that girls and women wouldn't just catch up to boys and men in education, but would blow right past them and keep going. Everyone was very
I don't know about what nobody expected. That already sounds a little suspect.
Focused, quite rightly, on getting to gender equality, getting to gender parity. It's not that long ago where there was a huge gender gap the other way, and there was a huge focus, correctly, in the 70s and 80s to really promote women and girls in education. But the line just kept going, and nobody predicted that. Nobody was saying, what if gender inequality re-emerges in just as big a way as now, in some cases bigger, but the other way around? And to some extent, everyone's...
Rollo has a meltdown every time someone gets more subs and attention or goes mainstream. Monotone and knowledge 20 years out of date about dating is a slow grift these days. Oof. I mean, if I wrote a ton of books and then all these new creators come around and pass me up, I'd probably be a little hurt too.
Still trying to get their head around this new world where, at least in education, when you talk about gender inequality, you're pretty much...
But here's the thing, like red pill knowledge is old. Rollo may be one of the ones that just took it all into one single point of a book. But guys have been knowledgeable about how to deal with women, like old school pimps off the streets. Dude, old school comedians. I mean, this shit's been around way before he published his first book. I guess the space might have been created around that book. I don't even know the origin of the red pill. What is the origin of the red pill? No, not the movie, guys. I know the red pill is based off the movie, but I mean the red pill itself, like the red pill forums from Reddit. Who originally created that and gave all this terminology that's used by the red pillars? Collection of info. I gotta look into that. Yeah, I got a lot of my stuff from Patrice, from old school movies, from men in my family, from, you know what I mean? Grandparent, grandpa. I don't know, life experience myself. Making mistakes. I guess the quote red pill gave names to things that, because I remember reading some post of that nature. Yeah, Tom Likas, whatever his name is, and just reading Paul Elam and just reading some of the whatever concepts and being like, oh yeah, that happened to me, or oh, this is what that's called.
About the ways in which girls and women are ahead of boys and men, and that's happened in a very, very short period of human history. So if you look at the US, for example, in the average school district in the US, girls are almost a grade level ahead of boys in English, and have caught up in math. If we look at those with the highest GPA scores, the top 10%.
Yeah, I hate how we're dividing into little tribes, red pill, black pill, all this color, purple, blue, all this shit. This is just a symptom of society today, where we put ourselves in little boxes in our own little tribes. And then you get into an echo chamber, and then one side fights the other side and thinks they're right. And then the core of the message gets lost in all the bullshit, and nobody makes any progress. It's a perfect system to keep people blind to the truth, essentially, and never escaping the actual trap of, quote, the Matrix.
2/3 of those are girls. If we look at those at the bottom, 2/3 of those are boys. When it comes to going to college, there's a 10% gap in college enrollment, a similar size gap in completing college, conditional on enrolling. And the result of those trends is that the gender gap in getting a college degree is now wider than it was in 1972, but the other way around. So in 1972, when Title IX was passed to promote more gender equality in education, there was a 13 percentage point gap in favor of men getting college degrees. Now there's a 15 percentage point gap in favor of women getting college degrees. So the gender inequality we see in college today is wider than it was 50 years ago. It's just the other way around. There's quite a fierce debate about the differences between male and female brains. And in adulthood, I think there's not much evidence that the brains are that different in ways that we should worry about or that are particularly consequential. But where there's no real debate is in the timing of brain development. It is quite clear that girls' brains develop more quickly than boys' brains do. And that the biggest difference...
Rollo's doing some drama thing currently, I guess. Never seen more drama between men within the red pill community. It's such energy, sorry to say, but we're getting lost in the sauce. I mean, it gets views. A ton of people will tune in. Again, race to the bottom. The lowest common denominator, the TikTok brains will tune in and watch all the bullshit and go, oh my God, this is so sick, bro. But it's not helping anything. And we're not moving the conversation forward. I don't know, man. It looks cringy to me from the outside looking in. Why are we, you know what this is? It's like when female rappers try to break into rap and then the whole game was pitting them against one another. They can never come together and create like sick nothing. It's just all, you got to be the queen this, battling one another constantly. They've always pitted them. Clicks and views, because that's what sells. It's a lot of bullshit, dude. It's all fake. It's insane. Too many weak men in this space. That's why this knowledge used to be privileged wisdom, but it has become common knowledge to regain balance and order. And then the problem is there's money now. It's gone mainstream. So you get a lot of grifters that come in. Dudes that let their wives get banged by a ton of men, which would automatically in this community make you look like a beta simp. You're to be relegated to the back of the room, never heard from again. You're a loser. Go back to the start and try again. Now we got those guys giving people advice. We got a dude that's hiding his wife. And what did he do with his own dad? Defrauded his own father, bro. What is going on? Dudes that are constantly used to dating single mothers. That could only get single mothers, the scraps, in their own words. The scraps are giving guys advice. What? Opportunists. And now women have entered the space too because it's gone mainstream. Women have had a hand in making it mainstream. And no disrespect to the ladies, but giving dating advice to men, yeah, you don't ask a fish for fishing advice. Will always ring true, sorry. But there's always going to be an army of simps. And it may be that, in general, they have a net positive effect on the community because the army of simps start on that softer side with the women and then distilled down into seeing the truth from the actual men, giving out actual advice. It's the opposite of stoicism. Yeah, dude. It's the emotional man. It is. It's unfortunate to see. It's like seeing your superhero in person, and he's like a drunk, an alcoholic, a loser. He's like sad, crying on stairs, screaming, hitting his head against the wall, and you're like, fuck, dude. I thought you were the perfect guy. You're just as broken as I am. You're nothing like you're portrayed to be.
This seems to occur in adolescence. So what happens is in adolescence, we develop what neuroscientists call the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex of our brain is sometimes known as the CEO of the brain. It's the bit of your brain that says you should do your chemistry homework rather than going out to party. It's the bit of your brain that says it is worth maintaining a high GPA because it will help you.
You know, what happened to men looking up to other men that were leading by example? And what I mean by this is like, if you're going to take advice for a man, you want to take advice from the man that has multiple women on his arm. You want to take advice from the man about money that has made millions of dollars or has a ton of money. You want to take advice from a man that looks like he challenges his body and his mind. Why are people taking advice from dudes that used to get stuffed in trash cans in high school? Just curious. Like skinny fat dudes, chubby dudes, out of shape dudes. Just out of curiosity. Do you know why Tate blew up? Why he took over the internet? He's one of the very few that exuded authenticity all around. He was wealthy. He was shredded. And everything he talked about was pretty much true. He could troll here and there, it doesn't matter. But he had the authenticity that young men could literally look at him and go, yeah, that guy's about his shit. If you're going to talk about women to me and you look like a fat slob and you got no game and you stutter or you're a weirdo or some crazy shit like that, it's like, bro, you don't get. Why are we even talking about women? It's cringe. You got to have some insane charisma. You got to be like Patrice O'Neal. You got to have some stripes, something that lets everybody know, yeah, like this guy's about his shit. He might be a Patrice O'Neal looking dude, but he's too smooth. The guy makes the room laugh, has charisma, shows up, everything. Everybody's comfortable around him. I'm not seeing that in some of these guys. I don't know. Most of these dudes, I can't recommend listening to them.
You get to college, which might help you in the future. And that bit of the brain develops considerably earlier in girls than in boys, between 1 and 2.
And I'm not saying, look, everybody's faking it. Right, and it's okay to fail, and you don't have to be perfect. And I'm sure everybody's got skeletons in the closet and shit, but dude, can you have like manly skeletons at least? Like not letting your wife get fucked by dudes? Like that one guy, what was his name? I always forget his name. Something Murphy, right? Or defrauding your own father. Jeez. Thoughts on Dan Bilzerian? It's a dude living his life. I don't know I know some of his personal life story. He started an Instagram. He lives his life. He has all around him. He does what he wants, and the rest of the world just follows and watches. I'm sure he has similar takes to what we do here in the Red Pill because the guy's living the life and he's seeing the true nature of women, and he'll tell you straight up, yeah, true. Yeah, women do behave that way. Yeah, I've done this, I've done that. Yeah. This is what you want to do if you get women. That's the guy you really ask if you want to get women. Just because he gets them. It's the experienced fisherman. If the fisherman with 20 fish in his bucket tells you, here's where I went to catch them, here's what I did, here's the lure I used, you would listen, no? That's just the truth, man. And that doesn't mean you have to approve of every single aspect of this person's life. But in this domain, it's something that you don't have to co-sign the guy's entire life and his whole history and everything he's been a part of that you don't approve of. I don't know why society today makes it seem like if you agree with one part of somebody's take that you co-sign their whole life. What? What are you talking about?
2 years earlier, partly because girls go into puberty a bit earlier than boys, and that seems to trigger some of this development. What that means is if you have an education system that rewards the ability to turn in homework, stay on task, worry about your GPA, prepare for college and so on, then just structurally, that's going to put an advantage the group whose brains have developed earlier in those particular areas, and that turns out on average to be girls. I think it's a great irony of women's progress that by taking the brakes off women's educational opportunities and aspirations, we've revealed the fact that the education system is slightly structured against boys and men because of these differences in the timing of brain development. But it took the women's movement to show that, because the natural advantages of women in education were impossible to see when women's aspirations were being capped by a sexist society. Now that those caps have been largely removed, we can see that it's boys and men who are at a disadvantage in the education system. At the risk of sounding boring, let's collect the data first so we know what we're dealing with here. I do think that we should be strongly encouraging boys to start school a year later than girls. I think that should become the default in many school districts because of the developmental gap that there is between boys and girls. Because boys' brains mature more slowly, then them starting school a year later would mean that they were developmentally closer to being peers with the girls in the classroom. We need a lot more male teachers. It's striking.
So this guy's rehashing what Warren Farrell basically wrote, correct? In The Boy Crisis? We're just rehashing this. This is not groundbreaking shit Richard Reeves is talking about here. Am I mistaken? I'm trying to look it up right now. Everything he's saying, solutions for education, redshirt boys. How about you just separate boys? It's not that they learn slower, they learn differently. How about you make male only and female only? Why do we have co-ed stuff?
That the teaching profession has become
more male teachers. It's not just male teachers we need. Heard this before, yeah. Mentors. We need mentors outside of school. We need to bring back physical activities for men. Hardship and physicality is where men learn.
Steadily more female over time. Only 24% of K-12 teachers now are male. That's down from 33% in the 80s. And fewer men are applying to teacher training year on year. And so we've seen this steady shift towards a close to an all-female environment. That has all kinds of consequences for the ethos of the school, for the way we deal with different kinds of behavior among boys and girls, for example. And so we need a very serious and intentional effort to get more men into teaching. The third thing I would do in this world where I have significant power to dictate policies would be significantly more investment in vocational education and training. That is an area where we do seem to see better results for boys and men on average, and one that's woefully underinvested.
Vocational training is better for boys? No shit, Sherlock. We learn better in a physical manner with things. When you make boys focus on things, the things that they like to do, like hand him a radio, make him pull it apart, let him see all the internal electric stuff, all the circuits, everything, the wires, how they go, how it works, what happens if you pull this wire from here, what happens if you solder this point here, and their brains light up. It's interesting. Sitting in class and having some some lesson plan on repeat playing for you with a teacher that has a voice so monotone no kid wants to pay attention to, and then you and then you tell the kid or their parents this child has a learning problem. No, you have a teaching problem. Kids are naturally curious. They want to learn, and they learn in different ways.
Invested in the US. The US has really bet most of its dollars on a very academic, a very narrow route towards.
Dude, I had some monotone teachers that made me hate certain subjects like science, which I loved watching the Discovery Channel. I loved watching Animal Planet. I loved learning on the Science Channel. But I would go to school with certain science teachers. I had like a bio teacher that was this woman that was so monotone and would put up on the projector the lesson plan and didn't give a shit, would sit down and just talk the entire day and would flip through the projector. I could not be bothered learning that shit. It was boring. Yet the next year, whatever science teacher I had then, I forgot his name, was a dude, and he was super into, chemistry. Chemistry is 10 times worse than biology. And yet I loved my chem class because that guy kept it super interesting with things. Would have us doing experiments all the time. Yes, I was paying attention. This guy's mixing shit and causing smoke to come out. Wow, I hate chemistry, but that guy made it interesting. So I was paying attention, I was learning shit.
Success and less emphasis on vocational training. And that has actually put boys and men at a disadvantage. So apprenticeships, technical high schools are actually a really good way to help more boys and men. I think one of the challenges with this debate is that if you're talking to women and men who are, say, at the top of the economic ladder, 4-year college degrees, decent incomes, they look around and they don't see some of these issues. But that's not the same for working class men. That's not the same for men lower down the economic ladder. So there's a danger that we're so busy, to borrow Sheryl Sandberg's phrase, so busy leaning in that we don't look down. The reality for men further down the ladder is very different. The economic trends for men have turned downwards along 4 dimensions. One is wages. Most men today earn less than most men did in 1979. In employment, with a drop in labor force participation of 8 percentage points, which means 9 million men now of prime age are not working. We've seen a drop in occupational stature, and so there are now more men working in employment areas which are...
We've outsourced factory jobs and a ton of the trades, and the workforce literally went from overseas over here. Think about this. So normal factory jobs, your grandpappy or daddy used to work, has gone overseas. Then for some more specialized physical labor, right, we've imported it with the H-1 visa and stuff like that. There's not really much left here. You're relegated to almost nothing. And you go to college at a 40% clip versus 60 for women. And you're taught history. You're taught diversity and inclusion. You're a predator. You're part of the patriarchy and you're benefiting. And then you go get your history degree, because what else is there? Women's studies. They tell you you gotta do women's studies, guys. You gotta diversify that curriculum, you bigot. And then by the time the guy graduates from something he doesn't even like doing, there's no job available for him, because when he applies, a woman will get it because of diversity and inclusion. And they got too many men there all working already. So you're relegated to doing trades, which holy shit, trades pay a ton these days. Eddie, thanks. My teen boys will not date and don't want cars or houses. I think the hate women have for men has really turned them off of school, success, and making a family. It's game over for your sons. In this country, in the West, boy, oh boy, if daddy doesn't have his own business to set them up to succeed, your kids are screwed. Unless they're going to be doctors, lawyers, something like that requires something, an engineer, or you need to pass a bar or take some state exam, it's game over, dude. You better learn to work with your hands. If you want to escape the trap, you got to go do some trade, something that doesn't get you knee deep in debt. So you said trades suck, loud, dirty, heavy stuff. Everyone smokes cigarettes and are blue-pilled. Again, that's the blue-pilled tradies. But if you go into a trade with a plan to start a business in a few years after, you can make a boss out of yourself. You can make hundreds of thousands of dollars. You could be a blue collar tradey cuck if you wanted to, or you can have a plan in place.
Seen as lower status than they were in the past. And we've also seen a drop in the acquisition of skills, drugs. The kinds of skills and education that boys and men need. If boys don't get educated and men don't get skilled, they will struggle in the labor market. And across all of those domains, we've seen a downwards turn for men in the last 4 or 5 decades. And so the way in which social class divides have opened up, economic inequality has widened, is really important to understand in the context of gender inequality. If we only focus on gender gaps, then we miss the fact that both men and women at the top have done increasingly well, but that's much less true of everybody else, and especially it's less true of those from lower income backgrounds, working class boys and men, and black boys and men. You see many of those trends are amplified, and so those boys and men are really the sharpest end of many of the social and economic changes.
It's because we live in a gynocracy. He can't say that out loud. He can't say that the fembot Kool-Aid society is sipping today is one of the main driving factors for men falling behind. You can't say that. He just says we've put women ahead. Yeah, at the detriment of boys. You can't say that part out loud. That we've overcorrected. We've helped young women to the point, or I shouldn't say, we've helped women to the detriment of men. Instead of bringing both up together, we've pushed one down in order to bring the other up. Diversity and inclusion. Instead of the meritocracy and making women have merit and then being proficient in the job they're applying for, instead we went the lazy way and say, okay, well, we just need a quota. So we won't hire a man here because we have too many men already. So we'll just hire a woman, period. Doesn't matter. Is she qualified? Not really. Who cares? We just need her in here. Stupid. That's a stupid system.
On the one hand, we have a huge and successful and laudable effort to get more women into STEM jobs, so science, technology, engineering, and math. On the other side, we have what I call HEAL jobs. So that's health, education, administration, and literacy, almost, if you like, the opposite side of the coin to STEM jobs. And that's where a lot of the jobs are coming from. Health and education alone are huge and growing sectors in the US. And so
school isn't bad if you study STEM. Yeah, you should only be going to school for STEM. STEM only.
By my estimates, for every one job we're going to create in STEM between now and 2030, we're going to create 3 in HEAL jobs. But those jobs are at least as gender segregated as STEM jobs, but in the other direction. And unlike STEM, becoming more so over time. So if you look at the HEAL sector, only 24% of the workers in those sectors are male, and that number is falling. And in particular sectors, we're seeing a really precipitous drop in the number of men. We have a drop in the number of male teachers.
It's no joke, dude. It's hard to be a boy in the world today, coming up in the West. Why do I get the feeling that we're at the starting point of Warhammer 40K? Every traditional type of job that men used to do has been either outsourced or is about to be automated. Even in the military, women get special treatment. Yeah, we have different rules for women to apply. We're literally trying to push them through the door without any merit, dude. I mean, there's no other way to put it, honestly. It's all a ruse, dude. It's not real competition here. It's not real qualifications. If we have to have 2 separate systems for the same job, for example, the Army, if you want a woman in Special Forces, but the only way to get her through Ranger training is by changing the requirements for women, then that doesn't really count, does it? I'm surprised the military's on board with this woke stuff, dude. That's national security right there. That's national defense. You would think that's the last bastion where merit is the only thing that matters. Proficiency. Apparently not.
We have a very sharp drop in the number of male psychologists. That's dropped from 39% male to 29% male in the last decade alone. And among psychologists under the age of 30, only 5% are male. So we roll that forward, and we're going to see psychology becoming essentially almost an all-female profession. So these jobs, which are both crucial, I think, for society, and where it'd be very useful to have more diversity, are actually becoming more gender segregated. And so we have absolutely no effort to get more men into HEAL jobs, which is where I think the future lies and where we should be helping men to move. One of the problems that we face is what I call in the book a dad deficit.
Dad deficit? Fatherless homes?
And that
pushed by the government, by the way, where we reward broken homes because it makes an individual dependent on the system for the entirety of their life. Their outcomes are absolutely tremendously in the gutter when you compare them even with single father homes. So a single father home and a 2-parent household have the same outcomes, but you make a single mother household comparison and they have the worst statistics and outcomes.
That can be seen in various different ways. So 1 in 4 fathers don't live with their children. If parents split up, they're much more likely to lose contact with their fathers and with their mothers. And so 1 in 3 children, if their parents split up, don't see their father at all after a few years post the separation. So this fatherlessness is something that's very, very specific. And when 4 in 10 children are born outside marriage, and most children to less educated parents are born outside marriage, then we have to reinvent what it means to be a father. Because right now, men are still being held to an old standard of what it meant to be a successful father in a world where that is neither possible for many of them or even desirable. Because what we've seen is as women have grown in economic power and economic independence, then of course they're going to choose to be with a man rather than being forced to, as in the old days. This is probably the greatest liberation in human history, honestly, that women can now choose. whether to be with a man or not. More than 2 out of 5 households in the US now, a woman is the main.
2 out of 5 households, a woman is the main earner. Cool. Is this liberating though, like he's saying? Would you consider this liberating? When they're self-reporting, they're more miserable than they've ever been. They're more stressed than they've ever been. They're more doped up on pills than they've ever been. They have more mental health issues than ever. Is that liberating? I don't know. It doesn't sound liberating to me. Sounds like a trap, no?
Breadwinner. 40% of American women earn more than the average man. These are huge economic changes and all for the good. But it does pose some really sharp.
All for the good. Did you catch that? These are great changes. All for the good. So 40% of women earn more than men. So those 40% of women are now going to need a man because of hypergamy, a man above them in dating, which does not exist because less and less men are making that equivalent or higher. Those men don't exist simply. We're going to have an entire generation of women that are going to die alone because they won't settle on their hypergamous nature. 3 in 5 households are single moms. Nailed it. There you go. And we're wondering why the fabric of society is collapsing. James, thank you. People only care about men when it affects a woman's dating life. Less than that. People only care about men when it affects women, period. Forget dating life. If women aren't benefiting tremendously, nobody cares. Think about it. Men are expendable in society. We stay to drown. We stay to die. We go to war to die at the behest of who? Everybody else, basically. If 100 men die for some event, doesn't really matter. But if women and children start dying over a similar situation, it makes national news.
Questions about what fathers are for. And until we escape the obsolete model of the breadwinner father.
Yeah, that's right there. Men making less in society today, women most affected. That's when we start paying attention. Men are expendable, women most affected. Keep them coming.
Continue to see more and more men being left out of family life.
Alex.
And the kicker is that boys in families that don't have father presence suffer much more than girls. And so then what happens is that male disadvantage can become intergenerational, because if the fathers are struggling and therefore not really involved in their kids' lives, then the boys are the ones who suffer most, who will then go on to struggle themselves in education and the labor market. It's clear by now that marriage and social institutions and a sense of purpose matter to men. And so as we've seen these real challenges faced by men in education, work, and family, you're seeing some really difficult and troubling health consequences. And so the so-called deaths of despair, from suicide, overdose, or alcohol, 3 times higher among men than among women. Suicide itself, 3 times higher among men and women, and rising very quickly, especially among middle-aged men and younger men. So we can see these as symptoms, I think, of a broader malaise, which is what's troubling boys and men. And for men in particular, this sense of purpose is very important. I think it's a human universal that we need to be needed. There's a wonderful piece of work by an academic called Fiona Shand who looked at the last words that men had used to describe themselves before committing suicide or attempting suicide. And the top of the list were worthless and useless. I think if we create a society in which so many men do feel like they're not needed, then it's no surprise that we see these deaths of despair. We see problems with opioids. Opioids are a much bigger problem for men than they are for women. And one of the great tragedies of opioid deaths is the death rates are higher in part because the users are on their own.
That's because men are the only ones in society that get isolated. Women have social safety nets, both personal and government funded. What do men have? Where does a man go when he feels down on himself, besides his own close friends, if he has any, but he's usually isolated? Are there support groups for men? Rarely. 5-to-1 shelters are female only. There you go. Yeah, there's male shelters. Do you ever hear anything like that? And then as far as like problems with men in society today, and men feeling disconnected from their masculinity and lost in their own body and being driven by outside forces telling them what they should feel and how they should act. Well, think about it, man. When you're a little boy growing up in the West today, you're basically surrounded by women teachers, women college professors, women bosses, most likely. Women, what is that? What's that stupid department at every corporation? My brain is dying right now. It's 10:30. HR, there we go. Thank you. Human resources, bro. Mostly women. So, and then we no longer have anything that can test a man that tells you I have arrived to manhood. Nothing. We no longer even play sports. We don't have shop class. Yeah, HR is a bozo department. Yeah, there's nothing coming of age for men anymore. We don't have any trials that test your masculinity, that helps you arrive at a certain point in life where I am a man now. We have no mentors that teach you how to be a man. Nothing, dude. You basically go from boy to man with no rite of passage. You don't know when you become a man. You don't know what it means to be a man. You don't have a man that is there to teach you. If 3 out of 5 households are single mothers, that's tragic. Then if you even have the remainder of that 3 out of 5, that 2, they may have soy beta fathers. Done. So of those statistics in those households, how many young boys are actually growing up in a household where they have a good role model, a strong masculine man to follow and learn from? Think about it. So we're building an army of cucks. We're building an army of femboys, an army of soys and simps. Why do you think there's so many simps today? That's a fatherless activity. A simp is a fatherless activity. Why do you think a woman could just post up some nudes on OnlyFans and get millions of dollars and millions of simps in there? That's fatherless activity. That's a boy. That's a male. That's not a man. Men don't behave that way. These are fatherless males, lost in their own identity of what masculinity is. They have no idea what it is. And they cope with loneliness through porn and OnlyFans. And women are taking advantage of this hand over fist, making millions off the backs of lonely men. Society doesn't care that you're a lonely, lost man, dude. We're benefiting. That's what we're doing. Lost, lonely men are to be sucked dry of all their resources because that's all they're good for. They're losers. They don't even reproduce. They're just going to be alone. And you know what? Society is okay with that. The only repercussions are every once in a while we have a mass tragedy, a public tragedy. Something heinous happening. And that's all you'll hear about it. And society is okay accepting that as collateral, as long as you get the other mass of little soys that you can suck dry for every bit of labor and money. James, I noticed on the last stint on dating apps is the sheer amount of single mothers 18 to 21 who are entitled AF. Yeah, those are the mass pump and dumps by mostly the top 20% of men. And the rest, bottom 50, are the soy boy, bug-eating, simpy energy dudes that have absolutely nothing going for them, that are content with life, doing nothing, becoming nothing, addicted to video games, addicted to porn, grew up in a messed up household that probably never had a chance to even become a man, dude. There's a huge swath of men that never had the tools to even become men in the first place. That's something we haven't even talked about yet. So not only do we look at the simps and go, how do we eradicate the simps? It's all the simps' fault. It's hard to even blame. It's hard, man, when you really look at the problem to even blame the simps. When you look at the households, these feminized, crazy mothers they've had, how could you blame this guy who's completely lost? He doesn't know. From boyhood, he's been told how to be a man by a woman. That's why I say we have to save the simps. I've said that plenty of times, and people go, let them burn, let them get used. And I'm like, well, those simps, they outnumber us like 1,000 to 1. If we don't help men wake up from the trap, if we don't teach men to be men anymore, yeah, F the simps. You can say that, dude. F the simps. If we don't teach men to be men anymore, we're headed down a world of hurt. This is only going to get worse. Women are only going to keep coming up on the backs of simps. The delusions in dating, the entitlement, everything is going to just keep increasing to the point where real men really won't be needed in that fashion anyway. You can just have 2 to 3 simps on the roster. They'll have a baby by the bad boy, but the 2 to 3 simps will be what supports them in their lifestyle. So yeah, it truly is. What do you need a man for today? Think about it. From that side of the aisle, what do you really need a man for today? You got your own job. You got 2 to 3 orbiting simps. They're all buying you shit, paying you, DMing you money, cash apping you just to say hello. What do you really need a man for other than popping out a kid with one you think is hot and then later dipping? You don't really need him. And then you can get them on the hook for child support from the government. So the government and simps fund your lifestyle. No shit, you're a 10. Duh.
And so in some ways, the opioid epidemic is a perfect illustration of a whole series of things we're talking about, which is a loss of role in the family, a loss of status in the labor market, turning to drugs, and being isolated and withdrawn. And so in that example, I think you can see a symptom of this broader male malaise that we just need to take it more seriously. And we have a cultural responsibility as a society, men and women together, to help men and boys to adjust to this new world. Because right now, many of them are really struggling.
Get smarter, faster with videos from the...
Yeah, this dude is basically regurgitating Warren Farrell. And Warren Farrell is a straight G. You used to be like a feminist. And then he saw what was going on way earlier than all this guy. This guy's just the new flavor of the month, and he seems like controlled opposition, dude. He's just planted there to make it seem like, oh, we got an ally helping us out. Here we go. He's getting pushed in the mainstream, I'm guessing. Cool story, bro. If you're not going to denounce the negatives of the gynocracy, then he's milking it. Yeah, selling a book, dude. If you're not going to denounce diversity and inclusion, I don't really want to hear about what you got to say.